importa que mueras en lo alto del cielo, Señor. Te agradecemos este día porque podemos estudiar tu palabra, porque tú nos has acompañado durante todos estos días. Agradecemos el mensaje que tenemos ahora y pedimos, Señor, tu compañía para que nos pueda dar entendimiento de aquel mensaje, Señor, y también nos prepares para prontamente proclamarlos en cada una de nuestras ciudades donde vivimos, Señor. Quédate con nosotros, te lo pedimos. También te inspires al hermano Jeff que va a hablar, que pongas en él las palabras que tú necesitas, Señor, que nosotros escuchemos. Te lo pedimos todo esto por Jesús, tu Hijo amado. Amén.
Daniel chapter 4, in Millerite history, Nebuchadnezzar's second dream in chapter 4 is typifying Miller's second dream that's in early writings. But chapter 4 is going to have an application to the end of the world as well. So let's start in verse 4. And because we don't seem to be settled on the 1 hour, what is that, 1 year? That's chapter 4, right? Why do we have 1 year there in the binding out? 12 months. Okay, 12 months. So let's read to verse, including verse 19, beginning in verse 4. 2 verses each. I'll start. I, Nebuchadnezzar, was at rest in mine house, and flourishing in my palace. I saw a dream which made me afraid, and the thoughts upon my bed and the vision of my head troubled me. So he's having a dream that troubles him. He had a dream that troubled him in chapter 2, and Pharaoh has a dream that troubles him in Genesis. So in terms of chapter 4, I'm saying he's troubled at 9/11. Next 2 verses.
Therefore made I a decree to bring in all the wise men of Babylon before me, that they might make known unto me the interpretation of the dream. Then came in the magicians, the astrologers, the Chaldeans, and the soothsayers. And I told the dream before them, but they did not make known unto me the interpretation thereof.
This would be a decree, right? Okay.
But at the last Daniel came in before me, whose name was Belteshazzar, according to the name of my God, and in whom is the spirit of the holy gods. And before him I told the dream, saying, O Belteshazzar, master of the magicians, because I know that the spirit of the holy gods is in thee, and no secret troubled thee. Tell me the visions of my dream that I have seen, and the interpretation thereof.
So perhaps you can see in here a distinction between the wise and foolish virgins. He's the head of the wise men. The distinction is the Holy Spirit's in him, and that's the distinction between the wise and foolish virgins. Is the wise have the oil, but the foolish don't. Perhaps.
Thus were the visions of mine head in my bed. I saw and behold a tree in the midst of the earth, and the height thereof was great. The tree grew and was strong, and the height thereof reached unto heaven, and the side thereof to the end of all the earth.
Tiffany?
Sorry.
12.
The leaves thereof were fair, and the fruit thereof much. And in it was meat for all. The beasts of the field had shadow under it, and the fowls of the heaven dwelt in the boughs thereof, and all flesh was fed of it. I saw in the visions of my head upon my bed, and behold, a watcher, and an holy one came down from heaven.
When does he have his dream?
9/11.
Sister Allison?
He cried aloud and said thus, Hew down the tree and cut off his branches, shake off his leaves and scatter his fruit. Let the beasts get away from under it, and the fowls from the branches. Nevertheless, leave the stump of his roots in the earth with a band of iron and brass. in the tender grass of the field, let it be wet with the dew of heaven, and let his portion be with the beasts in the grass of the earth.
So I'm putting cry loud here because when the angel comes down in Revelation 18, he cries loudly. I didn't put loud cry because typically we would put loud cry down there, but the second angel that comes down in Revelation 18 cries loudly, just like we just read. You might do something about the dew, but that would probably be over when the judgment takes place. Brother Henry?
So let his heart be changed from man's, and let the beast's heart be given unto him, and let 7 times pass over him. Okay. And this matter is by the decree of the watchers, and the demand by the word of the holy ones, to the intent that the living may know that the Most High ruleth in the kingdom of men, and giveth it to whomsoever he will, and setteth up over it the basest of men.
This dream I, Nebuchadnezzar, have seen. Now thou, O Belteshazzar, declare the interpretation thereof, for as much as all the wise men of my kingdom are not able to make known unto me the interpretation, but thou art able, for the spirit of the holy gods is in thee. Then Daniel, whose name was Belteshazzar, was astonished for 1 hour, and his thoughts troubled him. The king spake and said, Belteshazzar, let not the dream or the interpretation thereof trouble thee. Belteshazzar answered and said, My lord, the dream be to them that hate thee, and the interpretation thereof to thine enemies.
In verse 17, there's probably some inference here at minimum that the purpose of the message that Daniel gives to Nebuchadnezzar, that God's people give to whoever Nebuchadnezzar represents, has to do with the change of the 6th kingdom to the 7th, about the transition from the kingdom of the United States to the one world government. It says, to the intent that the living may know that the Most High ruleth in the kingdom of men, and giveth it to whomsoever he will. Because in this history, that's the transition that's taking place. And in Daniel 2, that's the explanation, is about the sequence of the kingdoms of Bible prophecy. So it's probably a second witness that that's part of the message that God's people give to whoever Nebuchadnezzar represents. We know the interpretation. So let's drop to verse 27, where the warning message is given, and read from verse 27 to 33. 34, let's include 34. 27 to 34.
You want me to read all that?
2.
Wherefore, O king, let my counsel be acceptable unto thee, and break off thy sins by righteousness, and thine iniquities by shewing mercy to the poor, if it may be a lengthening of thy tranquility. All this came upon the king Nebuchadnezzar.
So when is Daniel giving him this warning message? At the end of 1 hour, right? We have to determine if the 1 hour is repeated, enlarged upon in the 12 months, or if the 12 months is... We have to figure out whether this is the end of the 1 hour at midnight, or this is the end of the 1 hour at the midnight cry.
Yep.
This is midnight, this is the midnight cry. Right? Okay.
At the end of 12th month, he walked in the palace of the kingdom of Babylon. The king spake and said, Is not this great Babylon that I have built for the house of the kingdom by the might of my power and for the honor of my majesty?
While the word was in the king's mouth, there fell a voice from heaven, saying, O King Nebuchadnezzar, to thee it is spoken, the kingdom is departed from thee, and they shall drive thee from men, and thy dwelling shall be with the beasts of the field. They shall make thee to eat grass as oxen, and 7 times shall pass over thee, until thou know that the Most High ruleth in the kingdom of men, and give it to whomsoever he will.
So, at the end of this 12 months, this 1 year, his kingdom's departed from him. Now that would, if you're familiar with the application of Revelation 11, which talks about the persecution that takes place at the end of the wilderness time period, then it's from that passage that we get the secondary evidence that the second horn comes up last. Or how's it say it in Daniel 7? Anyway, we're seeing that the Protestant horn comes up over the Republican horn in this history. That may be what's saying here, is that the Protestant churches right here at the beginning of the Midnight Cry, they take ascendancy over republicanism. If Nebuchadnezzar is the Republican horn in the United States, his kingdom may very well depart from him at the first Sunday law, because the Sunday laws is a testimony that the apostate Protestantism has reached the point where it can start directing political traffic in the United States. Maybe not, but his kingdom's going to depart down here too, so at the fractal level, that holds. This would be the whole United States. If what we're seeing about this relationship between the two horns is accurate, this may be where republicanism is being marked. His kingdom is removed. Yes?
I don't know if you guys already considered it. I wasn't here yesterday, but
No, we didn't consider anything really.
okay. There is an hour, the hour Bible prophecy that we're familiar with from the Sunday law to the close probation, and that history is a history of abiding off. So I was wondering if maybe it's possible that 9/11, there's a dream. Then the history between 9/11 and midnight, the wise men are called in, like chapter 2, and then the 1 hour is from midnight to the midnight cry. And then what that would do is it would put the 12 months, instead of in that biting off from midnight to the midnight cry, it would. Oh,
No?
Oh, I wasn't thinking there, but it could go forward, or it could repeat and enlarge, and the 12 months starts at 9/11 and ends at the midnight cry, or midnight cry, and that would parallel Esther, where we have 12 months, and also, we have another witness of 12 months from 9/11 to the midnight cry. Anyways, that's
What's the other witness? I remember it too.
it's Esther and I can't think of it off the top of my head.
Well, you got 12 in there with the disciples.
Yeah, 12. So.
With the disciples.
So either it would be a repeat and enlarge, I was thinking from 9/11 to the midnight cry, or even it might go forward from the midnight cry, but
Okay.
I'd probably be more inclined to.
That's what we have to solve on that. We're familiarizing with ourselves with it. So who's next?
The same hour was the thing fulfilled upon Nebuchadnezzar, and he was driven from man, and did eat grass as oxen, and his body was wet with the dew of heaven, till his hairs were grown like eagle's feathers, and his nails like birds' claws. And at the end of the days, I, Nebuchadnezzar, lifted up mine eyes unto heaven, and mine understanding returned unto me, and I blessed the Most High, and I praised and honored him that liveth forever, whose dominion is an everlasting dominion, and his kingdom is from generation to generation.
So we're marking the end of the days here. So the 7 times, the 2520, is going to come back to here. And I think we can put the dew in here. This is where the Holy Spirit's being poured out, right? Okay. Any other comments on that? Let's do chapter 6.
Sorry, so this is another hour now? The same hour.
This hour?
No, it says in verse 33, the same hour was the thing fulfilled.
In verse 33.
So this, yeah, it'd be in this same hour, right?
That would be midnight cry, wouldn't it be?
It's actually 12 months afterwards.
Pardon me?
It's 12 months after or later, because then Nebuchadnezzar is so proud.
So
and
what
then the
same hour? The same hour.
As he is proud.
It would be at the midnight cry, the hour.
Right here.
Yeah.
But what I'm saying is, it's saying the midnight cry is the same hour. What hour is it the same hour of? It'd be this hour, right? By context? No? So it's a different hour?
It's the 1 hour that's represented in Bible prophecy, most typically.
This is the hour of Bible prophecy.
Right. So that's what I would think it would be represented.
But there's an hour back here.
So if it's the same, then it should be the previous, not what's after, right?
I don't know. Did anyone have a nice clear thought on that? Maybe I'm muddling it, maybe everyone understood it. The same hour that Nebuchadnezzar lifts himself up in pride. So maybe that's all it's talking about. It's when and that's when.
He exalts himself.
It's at the end of 12 months.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's placing. It's a different hour, right? Okay, so we're getting out various hours.
Yeah, it's a different hour, but if you understood that each of those binding off periods for priests, Levites, and for 11th hour is an hour, then at the midnight cry, if that hour was there and the 12 months wasn't in that binding off, and you would see at the end of 12 months is also in that same hour. If you see what I'm saying. If the hour was in that binding off from midnight to midnight cry, like I was suggesting, then it would be still this same hour, because it would now be in at the end of that hour. Right?
Do you know what he's saying? I think I finally figured out what he's saying. He's saying the hour, the 1 hour that Daniel asked permission to give him some time.
Yeah.
Right? That the 1 year, the 12 months is a repeat and enlarge.
Yep.
So this is the 12 months. And at the end of the 12 months is where you have the 1 hour.
That makes more sense.
And that has a second witness because this is a binding off for an hour. And we know that from here to here is the 1 hour of Bible prophecy, which is the binding off for the 11th hour workers. So if we put this hour in here, so here they are, the decree is going forward to bring in the wise men to explain it. Daniel finally finds out about it. And then he asks for an hour time.
Yeah. Or he's astonished for an hour.
Astonished for an hour.
That would parallel the structure that we've established in chapter 2.
So the 12 months, where's it referenced the 12 months? He's astonished for 1 hour in verse 19.
29.
And then you're saying in 29, and at the end of 12 months. So I don't see how that works. Does everyone see the dilemma that I'm having with that?
12 months is after the time that he's going.
Yeah, he's astonished for 1 hour. Okay, if we're saying this is the 1 hour, because he knows what the dream means, but he's worried about telling Nebuchadnezzar because he knows it's bad news for Nebuchadnezzar. But he finally tells Nebuchadnezzar at the end of the 1 hour.
Yeah.
So that's Nebuchadnezzar's warning message from the book of Daniel. And a year later, Nebuchadnezzar rebels against that warning message. But you're saying that the year begins back here, and his rebellion at the end of the 12 months is right where he gets the warning message.
It would be right after he gets the. Yeah, right.
So there's no break in time from Daniel's giving him this warning message and right then and
he
there.
instantly lifts himself up in pride. It's what it would suggest if it was that way. It would be like he gets the warning message and he lifts himself.
And you're saying you can justify that by the book of Esther?
No, I'm just saying that there's 12 months there. I'm not
It's only
suggesting
the number
that.
12 that justifies it.
Yeah. I that doesn't fit for me. Does it fit for everyone else?
Well, I'm just wondering, what's that 12 months? Is it after that 1 hour and that's when a year later, he lifts himself up? Is that what you just said?
Here's the decree to bring in the wise men to explain the dream. Ultimately, Daniel gets brought in. I'm saying he gets brought in right here. He understands the dream right off the bat, but he's afraid to tell Nebuchadnezzar, so he waits an hour. He's astonished for 1 hour. So right here, he tells Nebuchadnezzar the dream. And his message is, break off thy sins by righteousness. Okay, so you've got a warning message, and then it says, a year later, he lifts up his heart against that warning message. I'm great Nebuchadnezzar that built Babylon. So it doesn't seem to fit for me. It seems like there needs to be... That's why I was saying here, the logic there is that he's called in, and I'm not saying this is right, I'm not settled on this either, but he's called in with everyone else at the same time. But this is the 1 hour.
Actually, it says, but at last Daniel came in before me in verse 8. But at last. So he was like the last that came in before me.
How many came in?
Well, he had all the...
How long does it take for all of us to come in this room in the morning?
I don't know, but there's a significance that he was the last one to see the king.
Yeah, but it doesn't necessarily describe a great deal of time.
And at that point...
Pardon me?
And at that point, he's basically called Daniel, and then it says whose name was Belteshazzar, the same thing in 19. There's a name change in 8, and there's a name change in 19.
At least he was part of the history there, because in Daniel 2 he wasn't, just like Esther, she was not part of this history. In Daniel 2 also not, and in Daniel 2 he comes in at midnight. There he comes before the king, and then he asks for extra time. It's the time of the binding out, and at the midnight cry he reveals it to the king. But here he is.
Even if he's the last, he's part of that.
He's part of the group there. And then he's astonished for an hour.
Okay. We know what we're dealing with. We don't have to solve this. I want to get chapter 6 in place too.
Why are we skipping over 5?
Skipping over what?
5.
Oh, skipping over 5 to 6. Because I was thinking of chapter 6. We have to do chapter 5. Okay.
No, we don't. I don't care. I'm just wondering why that was the sequence.
So let's do chapter 5. And then try to get to 6, which even puts a little more pressure on.
Oh, don't.
No, I don't mind. I want to get all 6 chapters in place before we start grappling with the prophecies of 7 through 12.
Has anybody tried to figure out the difference between Belshazzar and Belteshazzar?
Probably.
If there's a significance there?
So in chapter, I have no idea right now what that would be. In chapter 5, the claim that I'm making, and we read it, someone dug it out of the computer from Prophets and Kings, I think, or Patriarchs and Prophets, that Belshazzar and Nebuchadnezzar have a type-anti-type relationship. Remember when we dug that out the other day? Yeah. So Nebuchadnezzar is the beginning of Babylon, Belshazzar is the end of Babylon. The beginning illustrates the end, therefore we should be able to lay chapter 5 over chapter 4. Yes? Everyone follow that logic?
Why over chapter 4?
Because chapter 4 is the beginning and chapter 5 is the ending. Nebuchadnezzar is the first king, Belshazzar is the last king.
Well, don't we have Nebuchadnezzar also in the chapter 1, 2, and 3?
Yeah, but I'm saying chapter 4 and 5, they're both dealing with the judgment upon Babylon.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
They're the same story at the beginning and the end. So, let's read. Let's read through at least 12. 2 verses each, beginning in verse 1, first 12 verses.
Belshazzar the king made a great feast to 1,000 of his lords and drank wine before 1,000. Belshazzar, while he tasted the wine, commanded to bring the golden and silver vessels which his father Nebuchadnezzar had taken out of the temple which was in Jerusalem, that the king and his princes, his wives, his concubines might drink therein.
Who makes a feast? Ahasuerus? Ahasuerus?
Esther, a lot of people make these.
Esther?
Tons of feasts.
Herod? Okay, but there may be tons of feasts, but they're kind of restricted by whether they're put on by a king or not. We're looking for a king's feast.
Okay, the one with
Is Pharaoh making a feast at his birthday?
Is Pharaoh making a feast at his birthday?
Guess so.
It's not mentioned, but the butler's there, right? Okay, so he makes a great feast.
It is a feast.
Pardon me?
It is a feast at his birthday, for sure.
Yeah. And all the sanctuary implements are there. Where are we going to put the feast?
Constantine might make a feast, make Sunday a feast day, kind of like making a feast.
Maybe. Next 2 verses. Whoever, I guess it would be Chris. 3 and 4.
Then they brought the golden vessels that were taken out of the temple of the house of God, which was at Jerusalem, and the king and his princes, his wives, and his concubines drank in them. They drank wine and praised the gods of gold and of silver, of brass, of iron, of wood, and of stone.
So there's how many people drinking there?
4.
Pardon me? 4. Who said 4?
Binding up.
Tanya said it.
Tanya, okay. Yeah, there's 4.
Is that the 4th generation?
4th generation, party at the 4th generation. Okay.
Question, can you...
Pardon me?
Esther 1:7.
Esther 1:7 what?
And they gave them to drink in vessels of gold, diverse from one another, royal wine in abundance. So there's the parallel with that feast.
And where do we put that in the story of Esther?
Midnight Cry.
You guys are talking so, either my ears are getting worse than they already are. Who said that midnight cry?
Me. The midnight.
All right, you're not speaking loud enough that I can even hear the tone of your voice.
Also, it's better to speak up for the mic.
So are we going to argue that because Ahasuerus' feast, his is at the midnight cry?
No.
Who said the midnight cry?
9/11 for the 180, but this was the 7 days.
Yeah, this is the 7 days.
The second feast.
But you were saying midnight cry
No,
because
I'm
of
not.
what?
Because she's saying 1:7. It's the vessels of gold in
Yep.
Esther specifically. Is that? I'm not
Period.
suggesting.
I was saying when you see
one
those
way or the other.
vessels there, where have we marked those?
But I mean,
vessels?
there's 2 feasts in Esther, right?
The 180 and the
One is 9/11 to the midnight cry, and the other is the midnight cry to the Sunday law.
Yep.
Yep.
So if this feast is going to parallel it, we got to figure out which one it is.
Yep.
And one argument is this is a king's feast. And the vessels from the argument. Okay, so in the same hour, verse 5, who's reading?
In the same hour came forth fingers of a man's hand and wrote against the candlestick upon the plaster of the wall of the king's palace. And the king saw the part of the hand that wrote. Then the king's countenance was changed, and his thoughts troubled him, so that the joints of his loins were loosed, and his knees smote one against another.
Where is he?
At midnight cry, because we have the candlestick there. Like we mark the candlestick at midnight cry.
So you're saying that his probation is closing at the midnight cry.
His thoughts troubled.
I'm saying
His
that
thoughts
the
troubled
feast is
him.
at midnight cry.
Pardon me? Is it 9/11 exclusively?
No.
I actually see the same hour is also represented there as well, just like we had mentioned earlier at the midnight cry.
But we're finding hours on all of these things, right? So you're acknowledging that, but you're saying this one fits there.
Yeah, specific word, same hour instead of just hour.
Why is Sister Tamina saying the candlestick marks the midnight cry?
I'm not gonna speak about the cat.
You said it.
Yeah.
It's the lamp.
It's the lamp.
And it has two branches, which are the two binding off.
Okay.
Remember last trimester?
Everyone's familiar with that?
It's also, you only see part of the hand, and the Sunday law, the full hand is going to come down. So at the midnight cry, you're going to see part of the hand because the Sunday law decree starts. But at the Sunday law, you'll get the full hand.
Oh, I wouldn't have went that direction with the hand.
Why?
That is good.
But I'm saying that the hand, the activity of the hand occurs at the midnight cry.
Part of the hand.
No, but you're talking about Sunday law hand. I'm talking about the Lord removing his hand to produce an effect. He's producing an effect here with Belshazzar.
It's also the light of the candlestick that allows him to see his judgment. So that's like Daniel giving a message to the king, because the candlestick represents the church triumphant. The light of the church, the light of these people, is what allows him to know his judgment. If that's what the candlestick was.
We're saying if. I thought we had this established last trimester. Go ahead.
I have a question. Since this is about the fall of Babylon, and we know that this is the second angel's message, and the second angel message arrives at 9/11 to the midnight cry, where it's being empowered in the fractal level. Could it be that this hour goes from 9/11 to the midnight cry, and we see all this happening?
Well, verse 7 describes where
the
we're
feast, and then the writing on the wall. This is explaining 9/11 to the midnight cry. How everyone gets drunken, and then the message.
All right, let's
comes of
read two
judgment.
more verses. I think there's another argument that will allow us to put this in place in the next verse.
Okay. The king cried aloud to bring in the astrologers, the Chaldeans, and the soothsayers. And the king spake, and said to the wise men of Babylon, whosoever shall read this writing and show me the interpretation thereof, shall be clothed with scarlet, and have a chain of gold about his neck, and shall be the third ruler in the kingdom. Then came in all the king's wise men, but they could not read the writing, nor make known to the king the interpretation thereof.
So there's a crying aloud,
Right.
which
Right
can
there.
be here,
Oh.
or the midnight cry, or the loud cry.
But with the sequence, it's bringing you down, and it would, with the sequence of what's going on, talks about the writing, and now they're crying out loud, so it's like judgment.
Yeah, and there's one other thing in that verse.
Third in the kingdom.
He's going to be made the third ruler in the kingdom. So we're seeing the third ruler marked. What's the third ruler?
Third angel's message.
When does the third angel arrive?
Midnight cry.
Midnight cry. So everything in here. Did everyone follow what Sister Tamina, I think, said about, or maybe it was Michael, about the candlesticks? The candlestick in terms of the primary branch being the midnight cry, but it has 3 branches on the left and 3 branches on the right. And those 3 branches represent, the ones on the left represent this binding off period, and the one on the right, this binding off period. Okay, so are we saying then that Belshazzar's feast is here?
No. I think it's
There. I think chapter 5, 1 through 4 start at 9:11, and then verse 5 starts at the binding off.
Verse 5 is the binding off.
That's how I
Right.
recognize it.
Yeah. I think you have to see it.
That's how I see it.
Because
too.
Daniel's about to be called in.
And then they cry aloud after that.
Soon
They're
as-
in that binding off.
Okay, so
What were you saying? Sorry.
Oh, I was just thinking Daniel, it seems like Daniel should be given that when Daniel goes in there and actually interprets it, that should be at the midnight cry. So somehow.
this is
that's-
chapter 5. What, we got Brown for chapter 5. Okay, so we're saying, walk me through this.
Chapter 5, verse 1, Belteshazzar makes a feast at 9:11.
Okay, feast at 9/11.
Drinking the wine of Babylon.
Drinking the wine of Babylon.
Vessels.
The vessels.
Okay. You got your hand up.
I was just gonna say, this is a strong comparison to Daniel 2, where he has the dream and calls all the magicians and wise people, and they come in, but they can't express this, just they can't explain the dream, just the ones here in Daniel 5. And then we marked that at 9/11, and then when Daniel comes in, we mark that at midnight. And here we have the same story. The magicians don't understand it, but then they call for Daniel. So I would line this story up with Daniel too.
Okay, so this is midnight and Daniel's brought in. What do you want to say, my brother Tyler?
Never mind.
And Daniel 2, it's also 4 groups of people that come in, and it's also here. They're the king, princes, his wives, and his concubines.
Oh,
Okay, so you're saying they come in here?
yeah.
No, they're
Is that what you're saying?
That's not, I'm just taking note of the fact that they're,
Okay, so but I mean,
No, they're
you-
at 9/11.
they're at 9/11.
this is verse 2.
Okay, so
That's
you,
for the feast, though,
That's
right?
for the feast, yeah. That is for the feast.
Okay, so
you got a 4 in there.
Yeah.
Got the golden vessels.
Golden vessels.
Yeah, which we already.
Okay, so in verse 5 you're saying is the transition. And in the same hour. What's the hour?
The same hour as the one above.
Well, we haven't defined yet the 1 hour right where it is.
I know we haven't. That's what we're doing.
Judgment. There are 6 gods that they are worshipping. Type of God. The gods of gold, silver, brass, iron, wood, and stone.
Gold, silver, brass, iron.
Wood
It's the
and
stat.
Yeah.
Wood and stone, but gold, silver, brass, and iron is the statue of Daniel 2. In that
And the
exact
stone
order.
is cut out. Where's the wood coming?
I don't know about the wood and stone. But
The wood might be the foundation it's standing on.
No, go ahead.
Not on the earth.
Yeah, go ahead and give it a shot.
There's a verse in the Bible that talks about wood and stone. I don't know where it is.
Yeah, it's the foundation. It's referencing the foundation. You shouldn't bring wood and stubble upon that foundation because the fires are going to test every man's work, whatever it be. I don't know if that fits in here, but in any case, in verse 6, what does it tell us? The man's hand comes and writes upon the wall the 2520. And in verse 6, what's it telling us?
he was troubled.
He was troubled.
Fear. Yeah.
Okay, so
Is that repeat and
he's
line?
having a feast.
Get scared.
Where is he going to be troubled?
Midway.
Midnight?
9/11.
9/11.
Not sequentially.
No, you're already past that period of time.
Yes.
Because right after he's scared, then the
Why is
king
it the
cries.
transition?
Why is it the transition? What do you mean by that, my brother?
What's the transition from the first 4 forces? Verse 5, it says here.
How is it getting to the midnight cry, though, yes?
Yeah.
They're going along and they're partying, and all of a sudden it specifically marks a section of the party that things change.
This would be the hour
Right.
and would line up with that thought. But is that his thought right?
There was 1 hour, and this is same hour.
Not same hours. Same hour. It'd be 1 hour.
Yeah.
So in that same hour, the handwriting comes on the wall at midnight. Is that what we're saying?
I'm saying it's troubled at 9/11 because
What troubles you?
the vision that Babylon is falling.
Okay, yeah, but you're not getting my point. What is it that troubles the 10 kings and the east wind?
Yeah.
So how many times does the east wind hit? Hits here, there's trouble here, there's trouble here, there's trouble here. So the fact that there's trouble doesn't automatically plug it into 9/11.
And I'm saying, because saying thou art in the balance, I found one thing. It's the declaration that Babylon is fallen, It's the symbol coming down. The parallel Revelation 18, the divine symbol coming down to say Babylon is fallen. So the and is a troubling, so we'll put that troubling at 9/11 at just one thing, point in a period.
I get what you're saying. I don't know that I'd look at it that way. Any other comments before we move through the rest of this chapter and then try to pull these two chapters together? What do these two chapters have to do? What two chapters? 4 and 5. What do they have to do? They're going to have to agree. Disregard all the other chapters in the Bible. These two structures have to agree. Because they're the beginning and the ending. And we've got an hour in this chapter, right? And now we've got an hour here. And in that very hour, I would assume it's towards the end of that hour, right? The handwriting comes up on the wall and Daniel's comes in. Or does Daniel come in? Let's keep reading, I guess. Where did we leave off?
She suggests to bring Daniel. The grandmother comes in.
Yeah, we need to read that. She no doubt has her role is part of this story. His countenance was changed, and he was troubled, and he was astonished. And then in verse 10, whose turn?
My turn.
I guess.
In 10. Now the queen, by reason of the words of the king and his lords, came into the banquet house, and the queen spake and said, O king, live forever. Let not thy thoughts trouble thee, nor let thy countenance be changed. There is a man in thy kingdom, in whom the spirit of the holy gods, and in the days of thy father, light and understanding and wisdom, like the wisdom of the gods, was found in him, whom the king Nebuchadnezzar, thy father, the king, I say thy father, made master of the magicians, astrologers, Chaldeans, and soothsayers.
Read verse 12 too.
Forasmuch as an excellent spirit and knowledge and understanding, interpreting of dreams and showing of hard sentences, and dissolving of doubts were found in the same Daniel, whom the king named Belteshazzar. Now let Daniel be called, and he will show the interpretation.
It's a name change, but
He's twice troubled, once in verse 6 and then again verse 9. So I still cling to my thought that in verse 6, this is 9/11, he's troubled, he calls the magicians, and then maybe at the midnight cry, he's again troubled, and then his grandma comes in and says, Daniel can interpret this dream, telling that either the grandma represents the Levites, telling the king that Daniel, the priest, can interpret the dream or something.
I think you're further down for him to be so troubled, and then for the king to cry aloud. It seems like you're right there at the midnight.
there's a crying out. Go to Revelation 18, Sister Kathy. Revelation 18, verses 1 through 3. Read it for us, my sister.
And after these things I saw another angel come down from heaven, having great power, and the earth was lightened with his glory, and he cried mightily with a strong voice.
He did what?
Cried mightily. Okay.
There is a loud cry.
Yes.
At
Even at
9/11, there's a loud cry at the midnight cry, and there's a loud cry at the loud cry.
Okay.
And verse 10, we have a queen speaking. Isn't Esther speaking at the midnight cry?
When does Esther come before the king?
When does Esther come before the king?
Midnight cry.
Midnight cry.
At midnight or the midnight cry?
Well,
Midnight cry.
when she goes in there, it'd be the midnight cry.
Okay, so who is she? Who is?
We determined she was both a priest and a Levite.
No, I'm talking about this woman.
Church triumphant?
Is this the church triumphant coming into the story? The wife of Nebuchadnezzar.
She's a Levite. She knows the old paths.
She knows she's the old path.
She's a Levite and goes in Daniel the priest.
Well, she doesn't go in with Daniel. She goes in by herself.
She was already
Before
dead.
Daniel.
Yeah, she goes in before Daniel. She says, there's a man that can interpret this for you.
She was probably dead.
What?
Yeah, she may have been there, but I mean, her testimony doesn't identify that Daniel was standing there with her. She's saying, there's a guy in your kingdom that can solve this for you.
Yeah, she knows.
Daniel definitely wasn't there.
Pardon me?
She was not at the banquet.
I was just saying that, so Daniel definitely wasn't at this banquet. He had to be brought into this.
Yeah.
He wasn't partying.
So what she says on verse 10, now the king by reason of the words of the king and his lords came into the banquet house. So I mean she wasn't present at the banquet either. She was brought in because she had heard the news. I want to point something else. In Daniel 1 we see a change of names and all the young men that came out of Jerusalem.
But I don't want to go back to Daniel 1 until
I
we...
just want to point out that in verse 5, when the queen says, she makes point out that it's Daniel, whom the king had changed it to Belteshazzar, but then after that it's always referred as Daniel all the way through the end of the chapter. And we know that the name represents a character. So even though Nebuchadnezzar tried to change his name, at the very end he still remains Daniel, or referred to as Daniel.
So when does the queen come in verse 10?
I think at the midnight cry.
At the midnight cry.
Because there's also speaking.
So when's Daniel come in?
She might be coming at midnight.
Yeah, I'm thinking she comes in at midnight.
Yeah.
Anyone got a problem with that?
We're putting the
Doesn't
handwriting
line
on the
up
wall
with Esther.
before
Yeah, that's
even
my
the midnight
problem.
cry.
That's my problem. The handwriting on the wall, I think, would be our anchor point, and we'd work.
What is the handwriting on the wall?
You're numbered. Your days are numbered.
This is- Michael just pointed to it.
It's a chart.
He's using sign language now. Okay, so in the history of the Millerites, when does the handwriting of the wall come in?
Visual test, the second.
April 18th.
No, but forget those kind of dates. It comes in right here.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
second.
Yes.
It's the symbol of the foundation. So the handwriting on the wall is going to come in right here.
Okay.
It's the second test, Bishop.
It's the
Yeah, of the
of the Levites.
Well,
Of priests, I mean. Of the
it could
priests.
just as easily be the midnight cry because that's the second visual test for Adventism as a whole. It depends, I guess, who you're looking at.
yeah. Are you looking at the priests of the Adventism or the 144,000?
Well, isn't this an external line here?
One
Oh, yeah,
thought at a
that's-
time.
I was thinking it. I would think we've got both. We've got both at 9/11 passing by leadership and the USA being, how do you say?
Passed away.
Beginning to
passed
speak as a
by,
dragon. Yeah.
Begins to speak as a dragon. But so could that be the handwriting on the wall? Like everybody recognizes that there is something going on, but not fully understanding it, and it will be fully understood at midnight or midnight cry. So the handwriting on the wall can be.
But you didn't answer the thought you brought up about the distinction between internal and external. Is it all of Adventism recognizing something's going on after 9/11, or is it all the people in the United States that are recognizing something's going on after
Daniel
9/11?
recognized it.
Brahma?
Parminder makes a really good point, is that in verse 7 that these Chaldeans, astrologers, and all of those wise men, they absolutely recognized the 2520. They knew what that Gera, they recognized what that symbol, they just didn't understand the prophetic meaning of it. So they are actually a wise and a foolish represented. Daniel was the wise and they were the foolish. So on that level, internally then, they're part of the church. They know what the 25-20 means. They just can't understand it prophetically. There's no way they didn't understand 25-20 on the wall. It was in their language. They understood it.
Okay, so but in chapter 5, he throws a feast. And for how many classes does he throw a feast?
4.
For 4. Okay, and somewhere the handwriting's going to come on the wall, and it's going to trouble him. Is it come on the wall at the midnight cry and trouble him, or does it come on the wall right here and trouble him? If it does so, then his troubling is aligning with 9/11. Yes? And the 25-20 here is this, it possesses these lines of thought too.
But
okay, that you can't separate.
I thought that the 9/11 through the midnight was the hiding. So if this was the external and people are recognizing, I can see it, but the internal, I thought it was the hiding.
Different
Line?
different characteristic. Sister Tanya.
Sister White compares the feast of Belteshazzar with the feast that was happening during Aaron and the worshiping of the golden calf. I was wondering if there's any similarities in the line 2.
Well, if she does that, what does that say?
Midnight Cry, Sunday Law.
Midnight Cry, Sunday Law. Because that's the image of the beast.
I don't know the logic. I never fully understood it, or never looked at it much, but we have for the longest time said that Belshazzar's feast and Herod's feast are both at the midnight cry. So
why do we say that Herod's feast is at the midnight cry?
it's the dance of deception that takes place with Salome.
Is that why? How does that prove it?
That's
part of the story.
That's the story, yeah.
But what is the story of Herod and his feast? That's the second story. What's the first story? Elijah. Okay, so where do we place the story of Elijah in Mount Carmel?
The midnight cry.
It's in this history, and what happens at the end of the days in the story of Elijah? The prophets of Baal are killed.
Yeah.
What happens at the end of the days in the story of Herod?
John's killed.
Okay, so there's a death there. So if we're going to say that Belshazzar's feast is paralleling Herod's feast, there should be a death
Belshazzar.
here. Belshazzar dies in the same night.
There might be a way to justify what you're saying, because he's making this feast in 1 and 2, and he's tasting the wine, and it seems to me when he commands those vessels to be brought out of the temple, there's an immediate response by God. It kind of sounds sequential, but when you look at it, he commands that take these out of the vessels, and the minute they fill those up, that would be the immediate response of the 25-20, which would allow you then to place it right around the 9/11 time period.
When they did that,
Is there a visual test in the middle of 9/11 to the midnight cry?
Yeah.
Is there a visual test in the middle of 9/11 to the Sunday Law?
Yes.
Is there a visual test between the midnight cry and the Sunday Law that's different than those two? So you got visual tests all the way through. You got one here, you got one here, you got one here.
And 9/11 is a visual test too. If you look from a larger picture, then 9/11 is the visual test, right?
For what?
If we have 1989 Mark 1, then 9/11 Mark 2, and then Sunday Law Mark number 3, 9/11 is the visual test.
I don't think so.
You
The
don't
visual
think
test
so?
is the second test.
Isn't 9/11 and 1 line of thought the second test, the second step?
It's the empowerment of the first, and the second arrives there.
Which starts the visual test.
I don't ever remember us ever identifying 9/11 as a visual test. I mean, I know it's like Mark Bruce puts emphasis on it, that it's the sign of Jonah. You have to see it. But the test that begins here is the eating. It's the first test.
Okay.
It's also,
Are we going backwards or forwards?
It's also the fact that we recognize Islam is back in.
Are we going backwards or forwards? This is chapter 4. This is chapter 5. We never, what did we settle? I had this written up here yesterday. What did we settle today on chapter 4 about the hour and the 12 months?
We didn't.
We didn't.
Okay, so no one's seeming to have.
Where do you put the 1,000? Right off at the first verse of chapter 5, it mentions 1,000. Where do we have 1,000 somewhere else so we could line it up?
1,000
People of the feast.
1,000 and thousands. So where's 1,000?
thousands of his lords.
If you could find another 1,000, it might help put it down here.
It's the 10 kings.
Yeah.
They're all there.
Type of 10 and 9.
They're all assembled.
They're all
They were
assembled.
There's a language that's similar in Esther. It doesn't say 1,000, but it says all of the princes in power and kings. Media Persia.
And that's 9/11.
Yes,
That's 9/11.
The feast is 9/11, okay? It seems as you guys are not.
The feast is that whole. I mean, it's the whole time.
Yeah, it's the whole time period.
Yeah.
But you're going to mark it there.
It starts to.
But it's an hour-long feast, basically.
In fact, my Bible margin parallels Esther 1:3 with verse 1 of chapter 5. Not that that really matters, but
So does
it's in the
mine.
Bible margin.
So does mine.
So.
Okay, Brother Gabriel.
I'm just wondering if verse 7 is some kind of a decree. Whosoever shall read this writing shall be clothed.
Whosoever shall read this writing and show me the interpretation thereof shall be clothed with scarlet and have a chain of gold about his neck.
Like
Where's the
Joseph.
chain of gold? We've looked at the chain of gold before.
Joseph is given.
Joseph's given a chain of gold?
Well, he's given the
Wasn't that
Garment.
line
clothes.
upon line?
His,
What do you mean, wasn't that line upon line?
Because William Miller was the chain of gold, isn't it line upon line? Because William Miller was giving the commencements of the chain of truth. We have a chain.
Oh, perhaps, but I mean, there's another biblical story where someone is given gifts similar to this, and I think there's another chain of gold. Is it
Wasn't it-
Joseph?
I thought it was.
Well, he receives it at the end of the story, of this chapter.
No, I'm not talking about Daniel. I'm talking about a second witness.
It's Joseph.
Joseph, what?
41 verse 42.
Read it to us.
Where at?
41.
Genesis 41:42. And Pharaoh took off his ring from his hand and put it upon Joseph's hand and arrayed him in vestures of fine linen and put a gold chain about his neck.
When did he do that?
And he's made. In the next verse it
After
says
the
he's
dream.
made second in the kingdom.
The dream. He's seen the dream. He
Okay.
interpreted it. The 2/7.
What dream did he see?
The famine
Joseph.
and the feast.
Okay, so he's interpreting, Joseph's interpreting this history, but where is Joseph when he's doing that? When he gets his golden chain?
It's his birthday. Isn't it Pharaoh's birthday?
So he's here, but what is he made?
Second.
Second. When does the second angel arrive? Here. But when it happens to Daniel, he's made what?
Third.
When does the third arrive? So Daniel's down here. If that logic is sound. So if Daniel's down here, who brought Daniel in, so to speak?
The grandma.
The mother. Right here. What is she typifying? What is happening here? Someone, I think maybe Tanya, church triumphant.
Who is Daniel then?
A Levite.
Who is Daniel? Well, let's just first get the structure through and then ask ourselves, who is Daniel? How does this structure contribute to the beginning? Because this is the end.
The same hour would be at midnight.
The same hour would be at midnight. The same hour the handwriting comes on the wall. This hour here. What is that? What is the handwriting on the wall for Belshazzar?
It's his judgment.
It's his judgment. Okay? Who's judged first?
House of God.
Yeah. The tares fall away first. So he's judged here when the handwriting comes on the wall, just like the Protestants were judged on April 19th, but they don't die until October 22nd. Then they're praying to Satan.
The pronouncement of judgment, and then the execution comes later.
There you go. Sister Tamina?
The handwriting on the wall, could this be also the appearance?
The handwriting on the wall, could this be the mare?
Yeah.
Probably.
We all, if you, we made a distinction between the kingdom of Satan and the kingdom of God in Daniel 2, and made an application to the mare in Daniel 7. So the kingdom of God is the mare, and this is so the appearance. It's God. It might work.
If you relate to the idea, and this is an idea that I understood years ago, I don't know that it'll square up with prophetic realities any longer. But there's only 3 places in the Bible where God writes. And the story I used to have is the Father writes the 10 Commandments, but I think that might be Christ. Now, that's the caveat. But Jesus writes in the dust.
The sand.
And then here...
I don't think this is God.
Okay, who is it?
It's an angel, it's Christ, or it's I don't think God is.
Okay, so maybe it's Christ all 3 times. All right, in different forms. But what the writing is always has to do with what?
Judgment.
Close. Sin. Whether it's the 10 Commandments or writing in the sand, or judgment perhaps, you can't separate it from it. And here, it's judgment. What I'm saying is, when the writing comes on the wall, probation closes for Belshazzar.
That's right.
Okay, and then the church triumphant appears. Okay, and the church triumphant is going to give an explanation to Belshazzar about what this means, and how does the church triumphant give that explanation?
Referring to the old
Daniel?
From the book of Daniel. It brings Daniel in. Okay, so when does it give its explanation? At midnight cry. This is when Daniel shows up. The message of Daniel, the book of Daniel.
Actually, both of them give a witness to that, because the grandmother points him back to his grandfather Nebuchadnezzar, and then Daniel again reminds him again about Nebuchadnezzar. So there's 2 witnesses against him.
Do you hear what she said? Do you agree with what she said? Let me say that.
What did she say?
See, you didn't hear what she said.
I didn't hear what she said.
Okay, what did she say? Let's go to the verses. Verse 10. Well, let's not read them all because they're long verses. We've already read them. In verse 10, the queen comes in because of the reason of the words of the kings. She comes in, and in verse 11, she's referencing how he had been found worthy by Nebuchadnezzar.
I'm just saying that she's just bringing to his attention about his grandfather Nebuchadnezzar, and how Daniel was the one who explained him all his dreams and how they came true.
She says, remember the old past, Daniel was set up, and Daniel comes, or no, she doesn't say that. She says back in that your grandfather's time, Daniel was set up, and Daniel comes back in and rebukes him and says, you knew this. So you already knew this. She makes it sound like, oh, well, you didn't know, here's this guy. And Daniel comes in and says, like, you knew this. You already know.
Yeah, he watched it happen, according to Sister White.
Yeah.
What I was looking for, why I was going silent here, is if her reference to Nebuchadnezzar is typifying the warning message of Nebuchadnezzar that was put in history for Belshazzar, for certain Daniel confronts him with the same warning message.
Yeah.
So then you would have the same warning message at midnight in the midnight cry. You'd have this two marks lining up.
When you guys have the Ellen White comments in your Bible, it says there, when she comments chapter 5 verses 5 to 9, presence of unseen guests felt, she says there in the middle of the paragraph, at the moment when the sacrilegious revelry was at its height, a bloodless hand came forth and wrote words of doom on the wall of the banquet hall. So when the sacrilegious stuff was at its height, and it's midnight. Was, you see my point? It was on the peak. It was hyped.
Yeah, I don't necessarily see a reason to make a distinction here between Midnight and the Midnight Cry, where she comes in and says this, and then Daniel's called in later, because I think he's giving the prediction, and the prediction is at midnight, and I think that's a valid point too about the when iniquity has reached a full.
I agree with Tamina when she says that when they took those vessels out, it had reached its darkest time, which would be midnight.
Yeah, I would get that. I see a distinction between the grandma and Daniel.
How do we do it with Joseph, with the butler, and then first the butler goes to the king, and then Joseph comes?
Yeah.
The butler tells the king about Joseph, and then
like a
Joseph
forerunner.
shows up.
Yeah,
It may not be the binding out period, but there's some kind of distinction there.
Back to what Davina was saying at the very beginning, I think the distinction needs to be there because of the structure of Daniel 2. And also in Daniel 4,
Yes.
we've already established that Daniel's giving a message at Midnight Cry, and it's already, it's laid down. That structure's been laid down in two of the other chapters, so it kind of seems like...
If there's any defining structures, the one that's in Daniel itself should be the primary one.
Yeah. And then Joseph gives another witness, the same structure exists there, so...
In Daniel 2, there's another forerunner going telling the king, here's a man that might be able to help you. And then Daniel comes in, right?
Yeah.
Yep.
So Arioch is
Forerunner.
Arioch is the grandma.
the grandma.
Yeah.
Who is the butler? Okay,
Who was
so
Mordecai?
did you follow that?
I'm trying, well...
In Daniel chapter 2, Arioch's given the commission to go kill the wise men. So he goes and he finds Daniel. Okay, and he ends up presenting Daniel to the king. This is the guy that's going to solve your problem. Just like the butler comes to Pharaoh and says, I know a guy that's going to solve your problem.
Oh,
Just like
okay,
the grandma is saying, I know a guy that's going to solve your problem.
And there's that other guy in Esther, keeper of the women. Haggai, keeper of the women. He's like the
helps out.
The messenger.
Yeah, kind of like the
Back and forth.
precursor to Esther's thing.
Yeah.
Okay, driven for men.
I don't know if this makes a neat point, but I remember I was telling you when the Pharaoh had calling his wise men, there's only two type of wise men that they were called. Nebuchadnezzar has 4, but here in 5 we only see there's only 3 mentioned. When Belshazzar calls for his wise men, there's only 3 of them mentioned. And then when the grandmother comes in, she points him back again to 4 type of wise men that Nebuchadnezzar had. I don't know if there's a distinction in that 3 and 4.
We're beginning to see that the structure of Daniel is lining up with itself, all right? We still have some gray areas in 4 and 5, but let's go to chapter 6 so we can have at least those 6 chapters in place so that Noel can sort this out when I leave.
Can I ask one question?
Yeah.
Chapter 5, when Daniel's giving the interpretation, on 25 it says Mene Mene Tekel Upharsin, but then when he breaks it up, instead of using Upharsin, he just uses Perez.
Yeah,
Why is that?
I don't know.
Tamina says he couldn't read. Belteshazzar says, because his instructor says, in vain the king tried to read the burning letters. He had found a power too strong for him. He could not read the writing. But I don't believe that that is in the way it's stated. It's in his language. It's his monetary units, right? How could he not read it?
I thought it wasn't that language. Somebody had said before, this isn't the Babylonian, this isn't Syriac. Mene Tekel Upharsin's like some obscure form of Hebrew or something like that.
Is that the truth?
That's what I heard from somebody. I have to look at that and validate it.
I thought it was some high-level Babylonian.
Oh, okay. So it might be that too.
You know, some languages have different levels. There's a high German, a low German.
Yeah.
But you could be right.
Could he
I
read
don't- I-
it?
I
Then
don't
could he
know.
read it or not?
It depends on what you mean by read it.
I mean, he could. I think he could read the money. I mean, he could read the letters. Read it.
He just couldn't understand what it meant.
Sister White says that what God had written on the wall was wanting, fearful wanting. Wanting, fearful wanting. Letter 22, 1872. But when I break up the name mene, meaning number, tekel to balance or to weight, Upharsin is to split up or divide. And Perez basically means the same thing, to split up and break in pieces or divide.
Break in pieces.
Let's do chapter 6. And we did chapter 6 here recently, but let's do verses 1 and 2 for sure. And whose turn to read?
The Aramaic.
It wasn't Aramaic.
Yeah, it's Aramaic.
Brother Michael, your turn to read. Verses 1 through 3, chapter 6.
It pleased Darius to set over the kingdom 120 princes, which should be over the whole kingdom, and over these 3 presidents, of whom Daniel was first, that the princes might give accounts unto them, and the king should have no damage. Then this Daniel was preferred above the presidents and princes, because an excellent spirit was in him, and the king thought to set him over the whole realm.
Okay, so we got 120 there. So we can either plug that in from 9/11 to the Midnight Cry or from 9/11 to the Sunday Law. So let's plug it in from 9/11 to the Midnight Cry. And what does it tell us about Daniel?
He's first.
He's first of how many?
3.
3. So 1, 2, 3. Daniel is the first angel's message. And it says that these 3 should be over, we're going to be over the 120, so you could put the 120 down here. But we know that the 120 comes to the Midnight Cry. Why? Where did we get that from?
It's 4 months.
4 months? Where do we get that from?
Ezra 7:9.
And where else do we get 120 from?
Esther.
I'm looking for Moses.
This is a bunch.
Okay. Moses is how old when he dies right here? 120. How old is Aaron when he dies at the same place? 123. I'm saying this 123 is they're reaching the same terminal point. These 3 that are over these 120, they all come to the end here. And Moses dies at 120 at the same time that his brother dies at 123. So we have this history here. Of course, this could be all the way to the Sunday Law, the fractal level. Either way, still got the 1, 2, 3, still got the 120.
How do we get the 120 again to the Sunday Law in the bigger picture?
Same way, you can take Moses' death all the way to the Sunday Law.
How?
Just it's fractals.
Okay, because
It's
Midnight Cry is the Sunday Law.
fractals. You don't. You know this, right?
Also, the
Yeah.
story of Abraham gives a nice witness, because Abraham's 120, he's gone through his test, he's standing now at the Sunday Law, and he's about to kill, but he doesn't. That's like, we're not public evangelizing, but then we do. That was in the covenant lines that we did a while back.
I don't know about the last part, but you can take the 120 either to the Sunday Law or to the Midnight Cry. And if you take Abraham's 3 chapters where the covenant is marked and put them together line upon line, what is this activity of slaying Isaac? What does Sister White say it is?
It's a great light.
It's a great light that's set up at the beginning of the path that shines all along the way. It's the Midnight Cry, but if it's the Midnight Cry, it is the loud cry, the Sunday Law. So you can do the 120 at both levels. Here we're putting it in here. And we're saying that these 3 that are over them are the 3 steps from 9/11 to the Midnight Cry. Yes? Okay, so these guys are going to turn on Daniel concerning the law of his God. And what kingdom is this taking place in? This is Medo-Persia. This is in the time period of the United States. And they're going to write a decree that does not change. So what's he do? Oh, there's a decree. When's the decree written?
Isn't it 9/11 then? Because they're assembled together. Psalm 28, the kings are assembled.
He signs it and he put it in writing from
And then there's 30 days.
8 through 10. So the decree, you're going to...
Also in verse 7 is
9/11, the
verse
decree.
7, there's
Page
4.
The decree...
Consulted together, assembly, decree, 30 days.
And 30 days. So you're going to put the 30 days in here?
We put that in Esther, we didn't put it there.
From midnight to the midnight cry, the 30, right?
Yeah.
Because it's also 1 month.
Yeah.
Elizabeth is hiding 5 months and then the
one-
1
But
month.
in,
5 and make them 6. Or
I thought Brittany proved that wrong.
Yeah, she did, that's what I was trying to remember.
That the 30 actually extends before 9/11.
All the way to here.
Yeah, or
Midnight to
before.
midnight cry are the 3 days of fasting.
Yeah.
Yep,
Yeah.
that's right.
Midnight to midnight cry in Esther. So what we're saying about this though is that there's a decree and you can't pray for 30 days. And these two entities, at least in this story, they're not time. There are 120 governors and 3 presidents.
Princes.
So the element of 30 days would go right over the top. Okay?
What do you mean by that?
That time and people are 2 different things. We don't have to be governing the 30 days by this 120 as 120 days in this story.
Yeah.
There's a distinction between the time of the 30 days and the people of the 120 and the people of the 3.
So where do we put the 30 now in our timeline?
That's what we're...
It has to begin wherever the decree begins, right?
Yeah.
Isn't that just...
Yeah, I would have to start at 9/11 in this instance.
Context.
But all I'm saying is that somehow maybe the Book of Esther isn't talking about that same thing with their 30 days.
So what does it mean on verse 9 that the king Darius signed the writing and the decree?
Doubling?
You're trying to make a distinction between the writing and the decree?
Yeah, is there a distinction?
I don't know.
Sounds like there are.
It sounds like it could be, but it doesn't necessarily have to be.
The writing can be made into the decree.
Yeah, the writing is a decree.
I mean, technically, maybe the writing becomes a decree when the king's signature is on it.
Signs it.
It
So he
says-
signs the writing and the decree.
In verse 7 it says that to make a firm decree.
She says she hasn't been called in these 30 days. That's what I remember it was. Before,
And-
I haven't been
So
called in.
when is Esther called in?
The midnight.
During
Midnight
the
cry.
midnight.
Midway, midnight.
The 30 days takes you to midnight, then she
Yep.
has 3 days of fasting that takes you to the midnight
That's
cry.
right. That's right. That's
And then
it.
that's the first day of the feast and the
Right.
second day.
So what does that do to this story?
Let you have another 30 days, the second witness.
This is 30 days. And if you bring in Esther, you got 3 days of fasting here. But you don't really have to, do you? Because it's a point of time and a period of time. This 30 days can take you to right there to the midnight cry at the same time that it takes you to midnight. Yes?
Yes.
It seems like we're not there yet, but it seems like he prays on this exact same day that the decree goes
Give us
in.
a verse and tell us what you're talking about.
Okay, 10.
Verse
Oh, wait,
10.
yeah, 10. Now, 1 second. Now when Daniel knew that the writing was signed, he went into his house, and his windows being open in his chamber toward Jerusalem, he kneeled upon his knees 3 times a day and prayed and gave thanks before his God as he did aforetime.
There's your 3.
Oh yeah, it's interesting for the 3. But my point is, it seems like he's gonna get taken the same day the decree goes in, because he hears about it, and then he immediately goes and prays, and they hear this prayer, and they get him.
So
I don't know if that's valid though.
No, I don't think that matters. That's the assumption. They go after him right away.
Yeah.
That's my point though.
But that layout of Esther and Daniel, is it identical the same?
When does Mordecai understand about the decree?
Midnight.
At midnight.
Does he?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because
That's where he perceives.
Where he goes to Esther.
so that's when Daniel's understanding about the decree.
But he still goes ahead and prays 3 times.
Yeah, it doesn't change his character. His character is already set before he gets to midnight.
So that goes against what Tyler's saying. There's
Going
no
against what
chronology.
Tyler's saying.
No, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah, that's his problem.
That's my point.
What's your point?
My point is, I don't think the 30 days is from 9/11 forward. I think it's from either midnight or the midnight cry forward, because of what is happening. Because the first day he prays, he gets taken, like right there. This isn't the end of the 30 days. It's probably the very beginning of it.
It says though in verse 10, now when? Does it say, is that like in the English language the exact same, or is it like when
Once
he knew about it?
Once he knew about it, he prayed. He's the first in the kingdom, or the first over. It can't be long.
Because in Daniel 2, when he understands a dream, wasn't that also at midnight? Or did we mark him understanding at midnight at some point in time? That he understands at midnight?
Yeah, I'm trying to figure out what Tyler's saying.
I'm saying I think the 30 days start at midnight, and he has his 3 prayers a day thing, and it goes forward from there.
He's saying the 3.
But that's based upon the premise, if I'm understanding you right, that he knows about it right from the start because he's a president and he would know it. But that's kind of contradictory to the idea that these guys were doing stuff behind his back, right?
But the
He was
decrees
number
were
one,
published
though.
in the open.
It was in the open.
Like the thing with
Yeah.
Mordecai, we use the same logic with Mordecai. We say he's sitting in the king's gate. He had to have heard it right when it was given out, because it went cast abroad. I mean, they did it in secret, but then the decree is published. And once it's published, there's no more secret, because it's the Medo-Persian law. It's written in stone, so it doesn't matter anymore.
So
Secret.
you're suggesting that from either here to here is the 30 days, or from here to here is the 30 days?
No, I think it's probably at midnight. That's what I said that.
Midnight to midnight cry?
Just midnight to midnight cry.
Okay.
Well, neither of them you don't have the, yeah.
And so his 3 prayers,
Might be the 3 touches of Daniel kind of thing.
In the binding off.
In the binding off.
Yeah.
But his prayers are going concurrently with the 30 days.
Yeah. They're happening.
1, 2, 3 is right over the top of 30.
but his prayer, his initial prayer would be day 1.
Yeah.
Day 1.
The logic is day 1.
3 times on that day he prayed.
And he's going to do it every day thereafter.
Yeah.
So the decree starts at midnight. That's the decree.
Is that what you're saying, Tyler?
I'm suggesting that. I don't necessarily know of another good witness to show a decree.
A decree at
Well,
midnight?
If you look up above you, we actually have a decree question mark.
Where?
At midnight.
Oh yeah.
No, we found a decree at midnight just the other day. We were looking at Daniel.
That's what the decree midnight. The decree
No,
question
but then
mark is.
after that, we were like, we had a stat.
Yeah, we had a decree. What
We had
was
come
it?
to the conclusion that there is a decree at midnight, based on the context of whatever chapter we were in. Was it
9/11? We should have then we have the story of Esther. Haman has the intention to bring a decree, right, at 9/11.
Yes.
And it says not in verse 4 of Daniel 6, then the presidents and princes sought to find occasion against Daniel concerning the kingdom.
That's
but
Haman.
But they could not, that's Haman, right? But there was no decree yet, they couldn't find anything.
They were casting lots on what they could nail him on.
Yeah. And then at midnight they make this decision.
Okay, so Brother Noel, what are your plans for the next 4 classes? Tomorrow, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday. You already have something planned, right?
Yeah. I was thinking going over Nehemiah. It's not quite up to speed to this, but I will take a look at this, and if I see some insights, I can try to follow this. Not that.
At least we have to mention that Daniel for sure prayed 3 times before he was thrown in the lion's den, because the king labored till the setting of the sun, and that would have been Daniel's 3 prayers. So at least he got 3 prayers in. Just
What do you mean by that?
It says that the king,
Yes, I got the verse, but explain it in
he
the
prays
sequence.
morning, noon, and evening. He does his morning, noon, and evening. So before he gets thrown in, he's at least got 3. He's at the end of his 3rd prayer at minimum. We don't know how many days he got to do his rounds, but if he did do it on the first day, he got 3 prayers in before he got cast into the lion's den.
And so this is the lion's den.
Yeah, that looks like that would have to be that.
I think it has to be midnight too, though, because
What has to be midnight too?
the lion's den. The lion's den is the Sunday law, is the midnight cry, is midnight. And if he's a priest, which I'm pretty sure he is in this context, then his lion's den isn't the midnight cry, it's midnight to the midnight cry. But maybe that's not, I don't know.
Then it moves your 30 back to 9/11, and it starts.
I think he's thrown in the lion's den at the setting of the sun. That same day, whatever day he gets taken, or gets
You're saying it's day 1.
I'm saying this is all the first day of the 30 probably.
It happens right here.
And the same day he labors till the setting of the sun, and then he's thrown in that night.
Him praying on the
Kola, last thing you get to say in this class.
I was going to say, isn't the 3 prayers, the 3 demonstration of fruit in the binding off? Because he just said he had his window open.
He didn't change. That the argument for that for me is that he didn't change his procedure. His character had been set. Your character's set before the binding off. So bam, he's going to pray 3 times. There's your 3 markers for the binding off. Question is does he get arrested for doing that before he even does it almost?
Maybe even though
Because-
he's settled into it, maybe it's just what God gave us as that marker. The 3 that we need in the binding off period.
Yeah, that's for sure. But to me, it's like they have to give evidence. Look at, you passed the decree right here. He just broke the decree by praying 3 times. You need to bust him. But we're arguing almost that they wrote the decree and they busted him because they knew what he was going to do. And we know that isn't the case.
He prayed at least 1 time.
He prayed at least 1 time because we're saying that Darius labored until
The going down of the sun.
going down of the sun.
He prayed 3 times then,
Okay, so this got to be day 2.
depending on when the decree
It's gotta be
was
day
written,
2.
what time it went in. Yeah.
It sounds like he had 3 prayers before they caught him.
Yep. that's
So
what
it means
we
it
read.
has to have at least had a day to go in and pray 3 times.
That's what it
Okay, then they're going to bust him.
Day 2.
They're going to go to the king. It takes a little bit of time for the king to wake up to the fact, oh, I've been deceived.
And then he's
They've trapped my best guy. Okay, now if it's the first day, the sun's already down.
yeah.
It's got to be day 2.
It says, now when Daniel knew that the writing was signed, he went into his house and prayed. So maybe 3 days. It was as soon as he knew.
Yeah, we don't even know exactly when he knew.
He could have been away on business.
Mhm.
Nah, that's totally. But just
Kind of like
Because
Jesus
that's
was
what-
in the tomb.
He's going to his
There was one other hand before the time bell rang. Go ahead, Sister Tamina. It was your hand.
He's going into his house. He's not out doing public evangelism. He's staying in his house, in his tent.
It doesn't say he prayed 3 times. It says it was his custom to pray 3 times a day. That's all it says. It doesn't say he actually prayed 3 times.
Yeah, but
But sister,
It's just
I confirm
custom.
that was the decree. If anyone prays to anyone other than you,
Our eternal and merciful and loving, kind Father, I want to come before you at this time in Jesus' name and ask that you forgive us of our sins as we approach thy throne. Father, I ask and pray that you will bless all of us here today, Father, who have just partaken of this study, and may the words and the line upon line and the visions that we've been beholding, Father, through this study change us from the inside out, Lord. Father, I pray that you bless us all to have a zeal for your word and a love for your word, and that we might be settled into the truth both intellectually and spiritually, so that we cannot be moved. All these things I ask and pray in Jesus' name. Amen.